Hey readers! So something we discussed yesterday is how oral history can give a voice to people so they can tell their own stories. And today we're going to see just why that's so important. So the first thing I want you to do is in the glossary, go ahead and write down what you think oral history means. And this might change. That's totally okay. Something that happens a lot as we're learning is we understand things more and more. So you can go back and change it later if you're not sure yet. But today I want to talk to you about one of my dad's favorite quotes: history is written by the victors. So what that means is that the people who get to tell stories are the people who had a lot of power in that time. So for example, most of the stuff that was written about slavery in America was written by white people. So those are the same people that owned slaves. And you can bet when they wrote the history, they tried to make themselves look good. So they weren't very truthful a lot of times because, how are you truthfully going to say, hey, I kidnapped somebody and forced them to work for me and abuse them for their whole life, right? Nobody's going to say that. So what happens is that whoever writes the history kind of tells their side. But a really cool project was done where basically after, I hope that fourth graders, you have some idea of this history. If you don't, ask me, ask your family. After the Civil War, as the people who had been slaves before were getting old, there was a project done where people went around and interviewed them. And they got to hear their stories. So this was a really cool oral history project where they got a lot closer to the truth about what happened during slavery because they asked the people who hadn't gotten to tell their stories before. Because as you guys might know, one of the things that was really common during slavery was that slaves were not allowed to learn to read or write. So a lot of times they didn't get the chance to tell their story without the help of someone who knew how to read or write. And so, of course, some people who were enslaved did learn, or they became free and then learned, and they were able to write their story. But this project is so cool because it's the stories of hundreds of people whose history would have otherwise been lost. So that's why oral history is important. Even if you're interviewing someone who can read and can write and can tell their own story, they might just not have time, or they might not think it's important, or they might not realize that you and future generations really want to hear it. So that's why oral history is a big deal. And the reading lesson for today is called How Do Oral Histories Give Power Back to Our Communities? So you can answer this question right after you watch the video. And then during independent reading, instead of choosing your own book, you're going to choose one of these options. So this is an oral history project from another school in San Francisco. You can read a little bit about the project if you're curious. And I believe some of these are typed and some of them are audio. So you can pick which one you're interested in. There's some where they interviewed teachers. There's some where they interviewed people who immigrated. There's some where they interviewed their families about their roots. They interviewed some people who work in art. They interviewed some older people in their family, like grandmas and grandpas and great aunts. And they interviewed some people who were activists, who were involved in activism. And they interviewed some people who grew up in San Francisco a long time ago. So during reading today, you can pick any one of these. They're all awesome. And you can listen to or read it. Depending on, this one's an audio, you can see because there's little headphones. So today for reading, you're going to explore these. And when you're done, come back to your notebook and write what caught your attention in the story or stories you read today. Did it change your ideas about anything? And if you'd like to hear those instructions in Spanish, keep watching the video. Entonces aquí estamos con las preguntas en español. Después de ver este video, piensa en qué se diferencia la historia oral de la historia que usualmente leemos. Y durante la lectura independiente, como te enseñé, vas a ir aquí y puedes elegir algunas historias orales. Algunos son para escuchar, otras son para leer. Tú puedes elegir. Escribe aquí cuál escuchaste o cuál leíste. Y después regrese a tu cuaderno y di qué te llamó la atención en la historia o las historias que leíste hoy. ¿Cambió tus ideas sobre algo?